The smell hit him first, rancid meat, moldy bread, and a strange bitter powder laced across the plate. Marcus Chen, a respected Asian-American CEO en route to a prestigious summit, stared in disbelief at the so-called first-class meal placed before him. It wasn't just bad service, it was a message. And what followed would expose a conspiracy so dangerous, so calculated, it threatened to destroy not only his reputation, but his entire company. As fellow passengers laughed at the degrading comment from the flight attendant, "Maybe you should stick to eating rice," Marcus did not yell. He didn't threaten. Instead, he calmly pressed record on his phone. What the airline didn't know: he was the founder of a billion-dollar tech empire. And what started as humiliation at 30,000 feet would unravel into a corporate reckoning with civil rights implications. From poisoned food to manipulated TSA checks, Marcus was about to uncover a coordinated attack on executives of color in America's skies. Before we dive into this shocking journey of sabotage and justice, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest true stories exposing injustice and fighting back with facts. Marcus Chen hadn't always been the powerful man in the tailored Italian suit now seated in 2A. His journey began in a cramped garage in Oakland, coding through the night on outdated laptops while the world dismissed him as the quiet kid with good grades. That quiet kid built Mindspan Technologies, a company now valued at over $2.3 billion, shaping the way AI models were integrated into cybersecurity. Yet no amount of success could fully shield him from the bias that lurked in every high-rise boardroom and now every cabin of this elite airline. Earlier that morning, Marcus's assistant, Priya, had handed him his itinerary and prepped him for the Global Innovation Summit in New York. Everything was riding on this, a new international partnership that could outmaneuver a hostile takeover brewing from a rival conglomerate, Next-Gen Dynamics. But even before he reached the sky, he felt the clouds forming. At the TSA checkpoint, Marcus endured the now predictable ritual, his boarding pass questioned, ID scrutinized, and a random extra screening. The white businessman ahead of him breezed through in seconds, but Marcus, despite being born and raised in Chicago, was interrogated about the pronunciation of his last name. Chen, or is that Chin? One officer mocked. Supposed to be Chinese, right? He remained composed, submitting to the search. But when he noticed his encrypted company flash drive and his EpiPen case being mishandled and one piece of the case going missing, a quiet alarm rang in his head. Still, he moved forward, as he always had. Once at the gate, things didn't improve. A blonde flight attendant named Vanessa barely glanced at his boarding pass. "Coach isn't boarding yet," she said flatly, ignoring the bold first class printed across his pass. Only after repeated clarification did she wave him through. But the icy welcome followed him on to the aircraft. "Closet's full," Vanessa declared when Marcus asked to stow his custom suit jacket, only to see her hang another man's coat moments later. He took his seat 2A, next to a heavy-set man already sipping scotch. The man's name he'd later learn was Bradford Williams, Chief Strategy Officer of Williams Global Partners, parent company of Next-Gen Dynamics. Marcus immediately recognized the logo on Bradford's briefcase. That's when the comments started. "There must be some mistake," Bradford called out loudly. "Can you check his ticket again? His kind doesn't belong up here." Vanessa responded, not with correction, but with a polite apology. "So sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Williams. Would you prefer a different seat?" The subtle but steady barrage continued. Champagne was served to every first-class passenger except Marcus. When he asked, he was told, "We're out." A few minutes later, a newly seated passenger received a fresh flute of bubbly. Then came the accidental spill ice water dumped across his tray table and his laptop. No apology, just a passive-aggressive, "Oops, you should be more careful." Bradford chuckled next to him. "These Asians and their laptops," he muttered into his phone loud enough for others to hear. "Think they own the place just because they write a few lines of code." Marcus didn't react. He simply repositioned his phone on the tray table and began recording silently, deliberately. The digital eye never blinked. He wasn't just documenting rudeness. He was building a record. The meal service arrived like a ceremony for every passenger but him. Finely plated entrees, fine china, and warm smiles. But when Vanessa reached Marcus, her demeanor shifted again. She practically dropped the covered plate on his tray without a word. Marcus lifted the lid. Rotten meat, moldy bread, a sour, acrid smell that twisted his stomach. Spoiled, contaminated. and horrifyingly laced with a pale white powder. This wasn't just poor service, Marcus thought. This is dangerous. Excuse me, he said calmly. There's something wrong with my meal. Vanessa shrugged. Looks fine to me. You people eat worse in street markets, don't you? Bradford chimed in with faux disgust. Maybe he should stick to chopsticks and rice. Laughter from a few nearby passengers trickled in like cold wind. Marcus took a photo of the plate, then spoke clearly for the recording. I'm requesting a replacement meal. This is inedible. You're causing trouble, Vanessa snapped. First the champagne, now this. And then came the mistake. Marcus, trying to determine if this was just visual contamination or something more sinister, tasted a tiny bite of bread. Almost instantly, a tingling spread through his tongue and throat, a sensation he recognized all too well. Hives, swelling, breathing constriction. He lunged for his bag. His EpiPen wasn't there. His eyes widened. The TSA search. They took it, or worse, removed it deliberately. He slammed the call button. No response. Another minute passed. His throat tightened. His vision blurred. He staggered to the galley. Need EpiPen. Allergy. Can't breathe. Vanessa blocked his path. Return to your seat. From behind her, a young flight attendant, a trainee named Melissa, hesitated. Her face pale. She saw. She knew. I think he's having anaphylaxis, Melissa said, grabbing the emergency kit. Vanessa hissed, back off, rookie. But Melissa ignored her. With steady hands, she injected the epinephrine. Marcus collapsed against the bulkhead, gasping, alive barely, and recording all of it. As Marcus sat slumped against the bulkhead, the emergency epinephrine coursing through his bloodstream, a tidal wave of clarity washed over him. Not just the physical relief of breathing again, but the razor-sharp realization that what had just happened was not an isolated event. This was targeted, intentional, coordinated. He had survived an attack, and the battle was no longer just about his personal safety. It was about dismantling the machine behind it. Melissa Garcia, the flight attendant trainee who had saved his life, knelt beside him silently. Her hands trembled not from fear of the medical emergency, but from the weight of what she had just defied. She had violated direct orders from her supervisor, Vanessa. The power structure on this flight had always been clear: obey the chain of command or risk termination. Yet in that moment, she'd chosen humanity over hierarchy. Marcus saw that, and he knew then that she might be his first real ally. The moment was brief. Captain Whitmore stepped into the cabin, his expression visibly annoyed. "What's going on here?" he barked, directing his question not to Marcus, who was still recovering, but to Vanessa. "Minor episode," Vanessa replied casually. "He overreacted to the meal service." Melissa here panicked and gave him epinephrine without proper protocol. Marcus coughed, voice raspy but steady. "I was going into anaphylactic shock. Your meal triggered a severe allergic reaction. I never got a replacement, and my EpiPen was missing, likely removed by TSA. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Let's not start making accusations, Mr. Chen." But Marcus was done being silent. He pulled out his phone and played back the audio recording of Vanessa's voice. "Your people will eat anything, won't you?" Followed by Bradford's voice mocking him. The captain stiffened. Vanessa's smile faltered. Passengers around them turned in their seats, watching, listening. "You think this is just about bad service," Marcus said, now fully seated and steadying himself. "You tried to kill me, or at the very least, remove me from a board vote I was en route to. And you almost succeeded." Bradford, still seated nearby, glanced over with cold amusement. "Are we really going to play the victim now?" he sneered. "A little rice allergy and suddenly it's attempted murder." Marcus turned toward him, expression sharp. "You're not just a passenger, Mr. Williams. You're Chief Strategy Officer at Williams Global Partners, which owns Next-Gen Dynamics, the company trying to acquire Mindspan Technologies in a hostile takeover." Bradford smirked. "So what coincidences happen?" "Not this many," Marcus replied. "Especially not when I've seen you text Asian problem being handled before NY meeting." "Care to explain that phrase to everyone here?" A few passengers gasped audibly. One woman near the aisle raised her phone. "I have footage of everything, from the meal drop to the call button being ignored." Bradford's eyes flickered. He hadn't expected public exposure not like this. Not in a cabin full of cameras and phones. Melissa stepped forward again, her voice soft but resolute. "He's telling the truth. Vanessa told us before the flight that someone in 2A was to be treated differently. We were told it was a behavioral flag from corporate and we'd get a bonus if we followed instructions. I didn't know the full story, but I know I saw a man nearly die. Vanessa spun toward her furious. You little traitor. You're finished, no, said Marcus, now fully upright. She's just getting started. He turned to Melissa. Can you document what you were told? In writing, I'll make sure you have full legal protection. Melissa nodded, scared but determined. Yes. Now things were moving. Marcus connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, opened his encrypted corporate server, and began uploading everything recordings images of the contaminated meal TSA details, and even snippets of Bradford's text messages he'd glimpsed earlier. Then he crafted an emergency message to his company's board of directors, subject urgent, attempted sabotage and corporate espionage. While en route to the Global Innovation Summit, I was targeted in what appears to be a coordinated effort to incapacitate me and prevent my attendance at a critical board vote. Evidence includes deliberate contamination of my in-flight meals triggering anaphylaxis, missing EpiPen likely removed during TSA screening, onboard racial harassment by airline crew and passenger, Bradford Williams, evidence of collusion between my VP Richard Winters and Mr. Williams. I request the immediate delay of all board actions until I arrive and can present full findings. Do not proceed with any emergency votes or executive orders in my absence. He sent a copy to his legal team, the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection, and critically 2 major financial journalists known for covering hostile takeovers and corporate misconduct. He even attached the audio snippet of Bradford saying, "Your kind doesn't belong up here." If they wanted a public spectacle, they were about to get one. Passengers whispered now in hushed tones. The cabin was no longer united in silent compliance. They had witnessed too much. Their phones were filled with evidence. Some had already begun posting clips on social media. Hashtags were forming. Marcus's screen lit up with notifications. Trending skyward sabotage. Trending boardroom. Bias, and then Marcus Chen survived. Vanessa and Bradford retreated to the galley, whispering feverishly, their panic no longer hidden. Melissa handed Marcus a napkin. On it, she had scribbled, Bradford and Captain met before boarding. Saw envelope exchanged. The final link. Marcus added this to his file and hit send. The truth wasn't just on his side now. The world was watching. The silence that followed Marcus's email wasn't one of defeat. It was the calm before a storm. The brief pause in a grand chess game where one side realizes too late that they've walked into a checkmate trap. As the aircraft hurtled toward JFK International, Marcus sat upright in his seat, his body still recovering from the allergic reaction, but his mind sharp and activated. The pieces were finally in place. Now it was time to expose the full rot festering beneath the surface. Melissa returned once more during beverage service. In her gloved hand, she subtly handed Marcus another folded napkin. Inside were 2 names, Angela Mendez and Frank Doyle, the senior flight attendants who had been overheard confirming that bonuses were paid out before the flight. Beneath the names, she added, I'll testify. I'll help however I can. That single act of courage changed everything. Marcus didn't just have evidence, now he had a witness. And not just any witness, a whistleblower from inside the very institution responsible for nearly killing him. Still, Marcus understood that power didn't give up easily. It morphed, adapted, fought back. Bradford wasn't done. His seatmate was texting again. Every few seconds, Marcus noticed the flicker of his screen. The messages were short and clinical, but the intent was unmistakable. Security in place. Remove him quickly. Board vote must proceed. Bradford's entire posture remained smug. To him, the fight was over. He had called in powerful favors. Airport security was ready, and the boardroom was already under Richard Winters' control. But Marcus wasn't walking off that plane alone. Using the in-flight Wi-Fi, Marcus sent a final email not to his legal team, not to his board, but to every Mindspan employee worldwide. A company-wide bulletin. Subject statement from the CEO. In-flight incident and corporate attack. Dear team, this message comes from United Flight 788. Over the last 6 hours, I've been the target of a coordinated attack designed to prevent me from representing Mindspan Technologies at the Global Innovation Summit. I have faced racial discrimination, a medical emergency induced by a contaminated meal, and evidence of corporate sabotage linked to parties attempting a hostile takeover of our company. I want you to know I will not be silenced and I will not stand down. As your CEO, I have built this company on transparency, resilience, and merit. We will not let those values be stolen in the shadows. I am asking for your patience and support while we face this together. Sincerely, Marcus Chen, CEO, Mindspan Technologies. He hit send and watched the status bar confirm delivery to over 14,000 employees. Bradford leaned in smugly again, still trying to rally the troops. You'll be in custody by the time we land. I doubt your employees will care once NextGen triples their salaries. Marcus didn't even look at him. You still think this is about salary? That's your mistake. You've never understood loyalty. You've only bought silence. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged on. Captain Whitmore's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into John F. Kennedy International Airport. Local time is 4:12 p.m. and ground security will be meeting us at the gate to assist with a brief passenger inquiry. We ask that everyone remain seated. That word inquiry was meant to downplay the incoming storm. Marcus knew exactly what they intended: delay, isolate, silence. Keep him away from the boardroom long enough for Richard to finalize the acquisition. They'd try to paint him as erratic, unstable, anything to cast doubt on his leadership. But they had made their final miscalculation. Dr. Sarah Johnson, seated a few rows ahead, stood up mid-descent despite the flight crew's protest. She faced the first-class cabin and raised her voice just enough to be heard clearly. My name is Dr. Sarah Johnson. I am an attorney and a board member of the National Passenger Rights Coalition. I have personally witnessed multiple civil rights violations on this flight. Let this be recorded if any attempt is made to detain or silence Mr. Marcus Chen upon landing. I will consider it obstruction, retaliation, and a violation of federal whistleblower protection. The passengers murmured in surprise. Vanessa stood visibly seething. You're not allowed to stand during descent, ma'am. I'm not allowed to watch a man nearly die from racial negligence either, Sarah snapped back. So let's all make exceptions today. The energy in the cabin shifted. Support flowed toward Marcus in the form of silent nods, camera flashes, and quietly shared phone recordings. Multiple passengers, now emotionally invested, prepared their own statements. What had begun as passive observation was now collective resistance. Melissa Garcia returned again, this time in tears. They just told me I'm being reported for violating protocol, she whispered. Vanessa says I'm done after this flight. Marcus steadied her arm. You saved my life. You may have just saved this company too. The moment the plane touched down, Marcus moved with purpose. Before the flight attendants could even open the door, he triggered a pre-scheduled email release to all media contacts in his network. The subject line read, Asian American CEO targeted on flight attempted corporate takeover exposed. Attached were redacted screenshots, audio clips, and the damning video footage Melissa had already helped him organize. Vanessa opened the door with forced cheer. Welcome to New York, ladies and gentlemen. Waiting on the jetway were two security officers in Navy uniforms and a tall man in a dark business suit, Bradford's security contractor. Vanessa gestured toward Marcus. He's the one. He was recording crew members without permission and behaving erratically. Before they could act, Dr. Johnson stepped into the aisle again, credentials in hand. Officers, I must insist this passenger not be moved until I've spoken with your commanding supervisor. I have legal standing to intervene on behalf of a federal complaint regarding discriminatory treatment and medical negligence. The officers hesitated. One of them reached for his radio. At the same time, another uniformed figure pushed through the crowd, a representative from the Department of Transportation. We've received multiple live streams and complaints regarding the conduct aboard this flight, he said. No passenger is to be detained until we've reviewed this. Bradford stood up, face pale. This is a mistake. Marcus turned to face him one last time before exiting the aircraft. No, the mistake was thinking I wouldn't fight back. He stepped into the jet bridge, flanked by Sarah Johnson and Melissa Garcia, his legal shield and his whistleblower. In his pocket, his phone vibrated. A new text from Anita, his general counsel board meeting delayed. 3 members already backing you. More want to hear your side. Get here fast. Marcus didn't smile. There was still a war to win, but the tide had turned. The moment Marcus stepped into JFK's terminal, the energy shifted. It wasn't just the tension of airport protocol or media curiosity. It was the subtle collective recognition of something extraordinary unfolding in real time. Terminal staff whispered among themselves. A group of passengers from the same flight clustered near Gate 32B, holding their phones aloft, comparing video clips of what they'd witnessed. And in that sea of activity, Marcus Chen walked forward with a silent clarity that no CEO training could ever instill. He had nearly died on that plane, but what he'd gained in the process was far greater momentum. Just outside the arrival gate, two uniformed FBI agents were waiting. Not TSA, not airport security federal agents. One of them, a tall black woman in a dark blazer with a badge tucked subtly at her belt, stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, Special Agent Renee Caldwell, Corporate Espionage Division," she said, flashing credentials. "We received your encrypted evidence. Our team is standing by at your headquarters. We're ready to act." Marcus handed over a USB with a backup of all the files he had sent earlier. "Everything you need is in here: timestamps, text logs, in-flight recordings, employee statements. And there's more coming." Agent Caldwell gave a curt nod. "Understood. You won't be alone from this point forward." As Marcus exited the terminal, a storm of cameras and reporters descended, shouting questions and flashing microphones. But Anita Desai, his general counsel, was already there with a protective ring of security and legal assistance. "No comment at this time," she said firmly. "Mr. Chen is heading directly to a private meeting." But even as they made their way toward the waiting car, Marcus glanced back to the glass doors behind him. Several first-class passengers were still standing near the windows watching him leave. Among them, Dr. Sarah Johnson, who nodded solemnly, and Melissa Garcia, now stripped of her uniform but still defiantly standing near the gate. She raised her phone and snapped a photo, not for drama, but for evidence. Behind her, more passengers followed suit. The bystanders were no longer bystanders. In the black SUV heading into Manhattan, Anita filled him in. "The boardroom is on lockdown. Richard called an emergency session and has already started trying to push through the next-gen acquisition. He's painted you as unstable, playing up the flight incident and misrepresenting your health condition." Marcus tapped the side of his head. "They're trying to erase me before I even step through the door." "They won't succeed," Anita replied. "Several employees from the flight have already contacted us anonymously. At least 2 passengers have offered sworn affidavits about what they saw. And the social media response has exploded." Indeed, as Marcus checked his phone, hashtags like Skyward Sabotage and CEO in-flight racism were trending. The live stream he'd launched midair had already surpassed 2 million views and was now circulating among corporate HR networks, investor forums, and civil rights groups. Inside the boardroom at Mindspan headquarters, Richard Winters was speaking with carefully crafted precision. "We all want what's best for this company," he said to the table of suited executives. "But Marcus has unfortunately shown erratic behavior in recent months. I believe he's experiencing the pressure of expansion, and this latest flight incident only confirms that he may not be in the best condition to lead." Some board members nodded hesitantly. Others exchanged uncertain glances. Then, just as Richard presented a press release titled "Mindspan Names Interim CEO Amid Crisis," the door burst open. Marcus entered. Behind him were Anita, 2 legal aides, and unexpectedly Special Agent Renee Caldwell. Richard froze. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "You shouldn't be here. I'm exactly where I need to be," Marcus interrupted, walking straight to the presentation table. He didn't yell. He didn't shake. He simply inserted his flash drive and said, "Let me show you what happened. Then we can talk about who's fit to lead this company." The video evidence began to play. There were gasps as Bradford's racially charged comments echoed through the speakers. There were shocked looks as Vanessa's dismissive tone and medical negligence played out. When the footage showed Marcus gasping for air, ignored by the crew, the room fell utterly silent. But it was the final segment, Bradford's text, the bribe, and the email correspondence with Richard, that made the room shift entirely. "You see," Marcus said quietly, "this wasn't about me being unwell. This was about an orchestrated corporate coup. A conspiracy involving my VP, an outside competitor, and a flight crew paid to ensure I wouldn't survive long enough to stop a board vote." Richard stood, voice trembling. This is manipulated. He's spinning a narrative." Marcus didn't even need to respond. Agent Caldwell stepped forward. "The FBI is formally opening a federal investigation into Williams Global Partners and NextGen Dynamics. We have probable cause for charges, including corporate espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted bodily harm." The lead board member, a silver-haired woman with decades in the industry, stood. "Mr. Winters," she said with measured calm, "you're suspended pending further investigation." Security will escort you out. Effective immediately. Richard's mask shattered. You're all making a mistake. He's not one of us. He'll ruin this company. No, the board member replied. You already did. Marcus exhaled as Richard was removed. But this was not victory yet, just the collapse of the front lines of a war stretching much further than one boardroom. Melissa's video statement went public an hour later. I was told not to intervene, she said in her tearful recording. I was told the passenger had disrupted the cabin. But what I saw was racism. What I saw could have killed him. That moment changed everything. Skyward's CEO tried issuing a cold pre-written apology, but it backfired instantly. Passengers flooded the company's customer service lines with complaints. Civil rights attorneys contacted Marcus for class action representation. Investor confidence in Skyward Air plummeted 17% in a single day. Williams Global Partners issued a denial only to have journalists leak Bradford's travel history and repeat connections to executives of color. Within 48 hours, Skyward's stock cratered, and yet Marcus made no public statement. Not yet. He was still gathering. The witnesses had awakened, the public was watching, and the real reckoning was about to begin. The morning after Marcus reclaimed his boardroom seat, he stood in his office at Mindspan's Manhattan headquarters, watching the sunrise stretch across the skyline. Beneath the golden light, the city buzzed with whispers of what had transpired the night before a boardroom reversal, a viral exposé, and a CEO's return from the brink. But Marcus Chen knew the news cycle would not sustain the momentum on its own. If this was going to become more than a story, if it was going to become justice, it required a strategy, a system, and above all, unshakable proof. By 7:30 a.m., Mindspan's legal team, now fully mobilized, had turned their 21st floor executive conference room into a war room. Screens lined the walls displaying evidence folders, timeline charts, and social media metrics. Anita Desai presided at the head of the table, orchestrating a coordinated legal offensive with the precision of a general. Every angle was covered: civil rights violations, corporate sabotage, workplace discrimination, and attempted assault. But Marcus wanted more than lawsuits. He wanted accountability baked into the foundation of the system that allowed this to happen in the first place. We have enough to take down Bradford, and Richard and Anita began, but that won't fix the industry. Exactly, Marcus replied. This wasn't just a rogue flight crew. There's a pattern, and I intend to expose the entire framework behind it. They had already received 22 sworn affidavits from passengers on flight UA788, most of whom included timestamps and video clips of the racist incidents Marcus endured. Dr. Sarah Johnson had submitted her formal legal statement as both a witness and co-counsel in the pending civil suit. Melissa Garcia fired from Skyward Air just 36 hours after the incident had become a reluctant hero after her interview with the New York Times went live that morning. I didn't intervene at first, she confessed in the interview. I was scared. They made it clear the priority was to maintain cabin order, not treat every passenger equally. But when I saw Mr. Chen gasping for breath, I realized I wasn't watching an incident, I was watching a system unfold. The quote hit a nerve. It trended on social media under the hashtag system unfolding. Marcus watched from across the table as a young associate brought up an interactive heat map on the screen, plotting reports of racial discrimination involving airline employees over the past 5 years. Notice anything, the associate asked. Clusters formed around major business hubs, New York, San Francisco, London, Singapore. And nearly all of the victims, senior executives or high-level managers of color traveling near key financial events, investor summits, IPO launches, merger talks. This isn't negligence, Marcus said. This is a weaponized pattern. Delays, random security checks, accidental service errors. Every one of them a pressure point. Anita tapped her pen on the table. We need to think bigger. If this really is orchestrated at a corporate level, it's no longer just a civil case, it's racketeering. Rico, Marcus said, his voice dropping. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, designed to dismantle the mafia, but now potentially the key to unraveling a network of corporate sabotage built on racial discrimination. Anita nodded. We'll need to coordinate with the DOJ, but this level of cross-company collaboration with economic intent meets the criteria. Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was Elena Davidson, his FBI contact. He placed her on speaker. We've traced 3 more cases, she said. Same pattern. Asian or South Asian executives targeted mid-flight. In one case, an Indian CEO was detained for 12 hours after security found an unmarked flash drive in his bag. That flash drive turned out to be a decoy placed by a contractor hired through a shell firm linked to Williams Global. The room fell silent. "Tell me you have names," Marcus said. "We do now. And one of them is on your flight roster, Captain Robert Whitmore. We also found bank transfers linked to an offshore account recipient listed as R. Winters." Marcus exhaled. "Get me everything. We're going to court. But first we're going to Congress." The next call was to Congressman Javier Reyes, a longtime advocate for tech inclusion and labor ethics. Within hours, Marcus secured a hearing date before the House Subcommittee on Corporate Ethics and Aviation Policy. His testimony would be the spark to expose what the headlines were already calling the Skyward Conspiracy. By noon, the legal team had amassed over 500 pages of documentation, 37 media requests, and 8 whistleblower reports from other airlines. Each testimony painted the same picture: discriminatory targeting used to destabilize key figures before major business events. Back in his office, Marcus reviewed a new video sent by a former Skyward pilot. The footage taken from a crew briefing room captured Vanessa Reynolds discussing passenger profiling strategies with disturbing casualness. "Just keep the tension up. Nothing illegal. Skip their drink order, accidentally spill something. They'll look emotional by the time we're airborne." It was time-stamped just 2 weeks before Marcus's flight. He forwarded it to Anita. "This goes public tomorrow." Meanwhile, Marcus's tech team had finished building a secure digital archive. The Flight Ledger, a crowdsourced platform where victims could submit their experiences anonymously. Within the first 2 hours of its soft launch, over 120 incidents had been uploaded, complete with boarding passes, timestamps, and flight crew names. Marcus stared at the dashboard, the blinking red dots marking each report across the map. The system wasn't broken. It had been designed this way. But now, for the first time, it was being documented, measured, and confronted by a force greater than denial data. "We don't just want justice," Marcus told his team. "We want reform, and that means building tools that outlast this scandal." Melissa Garcia would be the first to join the advisory board for the Flight Ledger. Dr. Johnson would help navigate international legal frameworks. And Marcus, still recovering from the physical effects of his allergic reaction, would continue building the case brick by digital brick. The evidence was no longer isolated. It was a system, and now it was his system to dismantle. 3 days later, Marcus Chen stood before the polished doors of the Capitol's Rayburn House office building. He was flanked by Anita Desai, Dr. Sarah Johnson, and Melissa Garcia, each carrying binders packed with sworn statements, internal emails, videos, and financial records. Today wasn't just a press conference or an investor briefing. It was a formal congressional hearing, the United States House Subcommittee on Corporate Ethics and Aviation Policy versus Systemic Discrimination in the Skies. Inside the room buzzed with anticipation. Television crews, legal analysts, and airline lobbyists packed every available seat. At the front sat Chairman Reyes, flanked by representatives both skeptical and sympathetic. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was about dismantling an invisible structure that had stood unchallenged for decades. "Mr. Chen," the chairman began, "you have 10 minutes. Marcus approached the microphone, glanced briefly at the panel, then fixed his eyes on the crowd behind them, the people who had been ignored, dismissed, or silenced. 3 weeks ago, he began, "I boarded flight UA 788 expecting professionalism. Instead, I was humiliated, poisoned, and nearly prevented from attending a board vote that would determine the fate of the company I built. Not because of an accident, because of a coordinated attack designed to remove me from power." He clicked the first slide. On the monitors appeared a still frame of the contaminated meal served to him, time-stamped and annotated. This wasn't incompetence. This was calculated harm. Next came the TSA footage, agents ransacking his bag, notably removing his allergy medication without cause. Then video clips from the flight, Vanessa skipping his champagne, the mockery, the allergic reaction, and the moment Melissa administered the EpiPen. But the most damning clip, Bradford Williams boasting on a live microphone. "They think they belong in boardrooms just because they write code," his voice sneered across the speakers. "Let's remind them who really runs this country." Gasps rippled across the chamber. Marcus paused. This isn't just about one flight. This is about how racism is systemically used as a weapon to manipulate markets, sabotage competitors, and silence leadership that doesn't look the part. He turned to face the committee. This hearing isn't about victimhood, it's about structural power. I have documented 41 incidents where executives of color were harassed, delayed, or medically endangered before critical business events. In 70% of those cases, the companies they represented were later acquired by competitors linked to the same financial conglomerates. He tapped the next slide. Logos appeared: Williams Global Partners, Next Gen Dynamics, Skyward Air, a disturbing Venn diagram of influence and collusion. Chairman Reyes leaned forward. Do you have proof of collusion between these entities? Mr. Chen? We do, Marcus replied, nodding to Anita, who passed out physical dossiers to each committee member. The folders contained whistleblower testimonies, emails referencing passenger destabilization bonuses, and financial transfers from shell companies to airline personnel. One document contained internal next-gen memos discussing the Chen contingency plan, a blueprint for triggering a board vote during his absence. The room fell into stunned silence. Representative Klein, a longtime airline industry defender, tried to shift blame. Mr. Chen, isn't it possible these were isolated service issues misinterpreted as discrimination? Anita stood. With respect, Representative, how does one misinterpret the deletion of medical files, coordinated boarding delays, or a captain being caught on dash cam accepting bribes? Melissa Garcia was next to testify. She described the crew briefing, the prearranged mockery tactics, and the orders to maintain tension without triggering HR complaints. She recalled how Vanessa laughed after spilling ice water on Marcus's documents, and how Captain Whitmore had quietly praised her afterward, calling it an elegant escalation. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but strengthened as she continued. I didn't sign up to hurt people, but I was told if I questioned the instructions, I'd never fly again, Doctor. Johnson followed. As a lawyer and board member of the Airline Passenger Rights Association, she laid out the broader legal implications. What we're dealing with, she said, is corporate conspiracy that uses racism as a tool of business warfare. That falls under RICO. This isn't about wokeness. It's about criminal activity hiding behind customer service policies. The testimonies lasted 4 hours. At the end, Chairman Reyes made his intentions clear. We will be launching a bipartisan investigation into airline-level discrimination, corporate interference with competition, and the manipulation of travel security for business gain. We will issue subpoenas where needed. Mr. Chen, your courage in coming forward may change the course of this industry. After the hearing, the media pounced. Cameras flashed. Headlines blazed. Tech CEO exposes racial sabotage. In boardroom, power play. Congress investigates weaponized racism in air travel. But even as the spotlight intensified, Marcus knew the real confrontation hadn't yet occurred. That night, he received an encrypted message on his secure phone. Meet me, alone. Westbrook Hotel, 10th floor conference room. Midnight, no signature. He stared at the screen, then opened a secure folder containing voice recognition samples. The typing patterns matched one man, Richard Winters. Marcus didn't hesitate. An hour later, he entered the hotel camera pen clipped to his collar. Inside the darkened room stood Richard, disheveled, desperate but still smug. Had to see it myself, Richard said, chuckling. You actually did it. Brought the whole house down. Why summon me here? Marcus asked. Richard stepped forward, placing a hard drive on the table. Because they're going to erase me, Marcus. I was useful until I wasn't. This contains communications between next-gen execs and airline leadership. Proof they've done this before. To others. This goes way deeper than you think. Why give it to me? Because you won, Richard said bitterly. And maybe, just maybe, I don't want to disappear without making it count. Marcus took the drive, saying nothing. As he left the hotel, he understood this wasn't just a battle of companies. It was a battle for the soul of corporate America. By dawn, the digital copy of Richard Winters' hard drive had been decrypted and uploaded to a secure legal server. What it revealed shattered the last illusions Marcus had about the depth of the conspiracy. There weren't just isolated incidents of discrimination. This was a blueprint. A playbook used by a coalition of financial and corporate interests to destabilize, sabotage, and acquire minority-led firms. The drive included a database of 62 targeted executives, nearly all of them Asian, Black, or Latinx. Notes next to each entry outlined preferred disruption methods, airport delays, TSA diversions, in-flight, accidental incidents, and post-flight media smears. The files even detailed passenger behavior profiling algorithms designed to trigger heightened security checks based on facial recognition data and nationality markers. Marcus's name was listed under a red header, high threat level, strategic target. Underneath must be neutralized before Q2 summit. Anita Desai read through the documents with clenched fists. This isn't sabotage. It's organized assault, coordinated through shell corporations, consultants, and airline intermediaries. And they've been doing this for years. By noon, the legal team filed a petition with the U.S. Department of Justice to expand the case under federal racketeering statutes. A preliminary injunction was granted, freezing the assets of several named entities, including the shell companies funding the travel disruptions. The dominoes began falling. First to crack was Melissa Garcia's testimony. In a nationally televised interview, she confirmed everything Vanessa Reynolds' cruel instructions, the financial bonuses promised for degrading behavior, and Captain Whitmore's deliberate inaction. I was told not to treat Mr. Chen like a passenger, Melissa said. I was told to treat him like a problem. When asked why she came forward, her answer was simple, because one day it wouldn't be Marcus Chen. It'd be my brother, my father, someone who doesn't survive that kind of reaction. Her courage ignited a wave of whistleblowing from across the airline industry. Anonymous tip lines lit up. Former and current flight crew members leaked training manuals, memos, and internal chats. One memo read, VIP protocols differ based on racial optics, defer to white passengers, scrutinize others. Discretion is key. Within 72 hours, Skyward Air's CEO was subpoenaed. Financial records showed payments from consulting agencies linked directly to Williams Global Partners, disguised as training and reimbursements and incentive programs. Under pressure, the board voted to suspend executive leadership pending investigation. A temporary CEO, a former federal aviation compliance officer, was installed to stabilize the scandal-ridden airline. The media swarmed like never before. Public pressure mounted. Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok were flooded with FlightWatch tags, a movement built around the app Marcus had quietly launched days prior, which allowed passengers to document and report discrimination in real time. In its first week, the app logged over 11,000 submissions. Meanwhile, NextGen Dynamics began to implode. A team of investigative journalists armed with the new documents traced a pattern of soft takeovers fueled by unethical tactics. They discovered that Richard Winters had acted as an inside man on 3 previous acquisitions, each involving sudden CEO removals under dubious circumstances. Marcus had his IT team cross-reference Richard's travel logs with airport surveillance data from other incidents. In each case, the targeted executive had boarded a flight within 48 hours of the hostile acquisition, and in each case, either flight delays or medical issues prevented them from reaching key meetings. It was a chilling discovery. The final blow came when a former TSA supervisor came forward confirming that certain passengers flagged by a business security algorithm were singled out for random checks, not for safety, but at the request of corporate clients. He held up an internal message labeled Client 762 WGP priority tag that matched Marcus's flight records. Your government was being used as a weapon by private industry, Marcus told Anita. This is bigger than we thought. The DOJ expanded his probe. On the third day of the hearings, the House Oversight Committee announced a joint task force on corporate discrimination and espionage, co-chaired by bipartisan members, empowered by a special prosecutor. Subpoenas were issued to executives across 5 major airlines, TSA division heads, and 4 private equity firms. Bradford Williams was arrested at his penthouse. Footage showed FBI agents escorting him out in cuffs, with reporters shouting questions. Did you order the contamination of Marcus Chen's meal? Was this all to stop one board vote? He didn't respond. Within hours, his legal team filed for immunity in exchange for cooperation. But the DOJ declined. They already had what they needed. Back at Mindspan headquarters, the board convened for an emergency shareholder meeting. For once, it wasn't about profits, it was about purpose. We're not just a tech company anymore, Marcus said. We are proof that resilience can dismantle oppression. That innovation isn't just about code, it's about courage. The room erupted in applause. Anita stepped forward. We're recommending Marcus as chairman of the new Federal Advisory Board on Transportation Ethics and Technology, a public-private partnership to rebuild trust in the system. But Marcus paused. There's one thing I need to do first. He looked at the sealed folder in his hands, one that hadn't been opened yet. It was a letter, handwritten, from the widow of an Asian American CEO who had died of cardiac arrest during a delayed flight after being denied service by a Skyward crew. Her final line read, "He was so proud to finally be flying first class. He didn't know it would be the last place he'd ever feel small." Marcus stood in silence, then spoke, "This ends now, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong." 1 week later, the landscape of corporate America was unrecognizable. Marcus Chen stepped into the rotunda of the U.S., Capitol flanked not by lawyers or PR managers, but by whistleblowers, airline workers, human rights advocates, and civil rights attorneys. They weren't there for a press conference. They were there to testify under oath before Congress. At the hearing's opening, Senator Karen Whitmore, ironically no relation to the disgraced pilot, addressed the chamber. "What we've uncovered here is not an isolated act of racial bias. This is systematic sabotage enabled by regulatory negligence and corporate greed." Today's hearing will examine how Marcus Chen's case exposed the largest coordinated civil rights violation in the airline and corporate sector in decades. Marcus was sworn in. The room was silent as he began. "I was targeted not because I was weak, but because I was powerful. Because I represented a version of success that some could not tolerate, an Asian American CEO leading a billion-dollar tech firm. I was harassed, poisoned, and nearly detained not by accident, but by design." Behind him, a screen illuminated images from the flight, the mold-covered food, the TSA report, showing random selection, the dashcam footage of Captain Whitmore accepting a bribe. And then Marcus played the clip that had gone most viral, Bradford Williams mid-flight yelling, "You people need to learn your place." The committee watched in tense silence. When the footage ended, Marcus continued, "I'm not here because I want vengeance. I'm here because we need transparency, because we need systems that don't just punish bad actors, but prevent them. I'm here because the next victim might not survive the meal." Applause broke out despite congressional decorum. It wasn't just symbolic, it was transformative. That week, Congress passed the Passenger Civil Rights and Accountability Act, mandating independent federal oversight of discriminatory claims on all U.S.-based carriers. EBA real-time recording rights for passengers experiencing discrimination. A permanent whistleblower protection clause for airline and corporate employees. Skyward Air was forced into a consent decree overseen by a federal judge. Their board of directors was restructured. Internal documents showed that nearly 12% of their discretionary bonuses had been tied to passenger prioritization metrics, a coded term for racially tinged service discrepancies. Melissa Garcia, the once dismissed trainee, was reinstated and promoted. She now served as Director of Passenger Equity Training across all Skyward operations. The old guard had underestimated Marcus not just as an individual, but as a movement catalyst. That movement, powered by truth and tech, didn't stop at airlines. Several companies linked to Williams Global Partners began to implode under the weight of their own secrets. One by one, acquisitions were reversed. Executives stepped down. Stock values plummeted, and the public didn't stop watching. FlightWatch, the app Marcus's team had developed, was downloaded by over 7 million users in its first 30 days. Users could submit incidents, receive automatic legal advice, and forward critical footage directly to federal monitors. It became the standard for accountability across all major transportation hubs. Meanwhile, Mindspan Technologies flourished, not in spite of the ordeal, but because of it. Investors who had once hesitated now doubled down. They saw something they hadn't before, not just a tech CEO, but a visionary leader. Marcus launched the Equitable Innovation Fund with its first $50 million disbursement, investing in 12 minority-led startups that had been denied funding by the very firms implicated in the scandal. "I'm not just betting on code," Marcus told reporters. "I'm betting on who the industry ignores." Bradford Williams faced 27 felony charges, including attempted corporate sabotage, conspiracy to commit civil rights violations, and bribery of a federal agent. His defense team claimed he was a scapegoat, but with over 200 hours of audio, 89 witness statements, and encrypted chats recovered from his cloud storage, his conviction was all but certain. Richard Winters fled the country briefly, only to be extradited from the Cayman Islands. He appeared gaunt and bitter in his arraignment photo, claiming that Marcus used race as a shield to cover incompetence. The prosecution had a simpler narrative. He used race as a weapon. Marcus didn't speak at Richard's trial. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any closing argument. But for all the victories, Marcus knew the scars wouldn't fade easily. He still checked his food carefully on every flight, still felt that cold flash of memory when an announcement crackled overhead, still wondered how many others were suffering in silence thinking they were alone. So he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times titled "The First Class Ceiling When Success Doesn't Buy You Safety." It went viral within hours. The final line became a rallying cry. We were told that hard work would get us to the front of the plane. They didn't tell us we'd have to fight to stay there. Months later, the Department of Justice announced it was forming the Chen Commission, a special body tasked with reviewing corporate influence in public systems. Marcus was asked to chair it. He accepted, but on one condition, that Melissa Garcia and Dr. Sarah Johnson serve on the board alongside him. This isn't about me anymore, Marcus said at the press conference. It's about the system. And if we don't change the system, we'll keep changing victims. The room erupted in applause. But as he left the stage and looked out over the crowd, he saw something far more powerful than applause trust. People believed again in fairness, in resistance, and in the idea that one poisoned plate could expose a poisoned empire, and that exposing it could heal it. Marcus Chen's journey had begun with humiliation and sabotage on a commercial flight. But by the time the world saw the final chapter unfold, it was clear what started as a racist slight had transformed into a corporate reckoning that stretched across an entire industry and beyond. 6 months after his congressional testimony, Marcus stood on the tarmac at JFK International Airport, watching the new Skyward Air fleet unveil its rebranded identity. The airline had been acquired and restructured. The bold new slogan painted across each fuselage read, "Accountability flies here." He smiled not at the symbolism, but at the systemic transformation it represented. The first plane in the new fleet was named the Melissa Garcia in honor of the trainee who risked everything by doing the right thing. Reporters were already assembling for the press conference. But Marcus wasn't speaking today. This wasn't about him anymore. Melissa stepped to the podium. Once a trainee silenced by superiors, now the youngest executive in Skyward's history. Her voice was steady, her words crisp. We used to believe safety meant silence. That rocking the boat made us dangerous. But what I've learned from Marcus, and from all of you, is that silence protects power, not people. This plane represents a promise: we will listen, we will protect, and we will never reward discrimination again. The crowd erupted in applause. Among them passengers who had testified during the class action lawsuit, whistleblowers from rival firms and ordinary citizens who had watched Marcus's live stream and said enough. But the true legacy of this saga was unfolding behind the scenes. The Equitable Innovation Fund, launched with $50 million, had already incubated 2 groundbreaking startups led by women of color, one tackling AI bias in medical diagnostics, the other reinventing credit scoring for underbanked communities. These weren't just business ventures. They were systems of resistance, dismantling discrimination from within. Meanwhile, FlightWatch, the app Marcus's team had created, was adopted by 5 major airlines as part of a federal oversight pilot program. It became a model for other sectors, eventually evolving into WorkWatch, CareWatch, and LawWatch platforms, allowing real-time reporting of bias in workplaces, hospitals, and courthouses. Change wasn't immediate, but it was irreversible. And yet not all victories came without backlash. The alt-financial media spun Marcus as a corporate activist with a woke agenda. Anonymous op-eds accused him of using racial grievance for personal gain. Several corporate boards quietly blacklisted whistleblowers associated with the case. But the public wasn't buying it. Each new attack triggered a wave of support. Millions had watched Marcus suffer in silence. They'd seen him humiliated, poisoned, denied aid, and rise. And when he chose to fight back, not with vengeance, but with transparency and institutional reform, the narrative had changed forever. In schools, business ethics classes began analyzing the Marcus Chen flight incident as a case study in moral leadership. At Harvard, Stanford, and Howard, students debated what it meant to wield power justly. One such student, a young Chinese-American law major named Daniel Ho, wrote his thesis on the incident. He concluded Marcus Chen didn't just survive sabotage. He rewrote the manual on what ethical retaliation looks like in the face of systemic racism. He didn't just want an apology, he wanted accountability that lasts. At Mindspan Technologies, Marcus restructured internal policies to guarantee leadership pipelines for marginalized talent. No one would ever again have to prove their right to lead based on accents, ancestry, or appearance. When a Fortune 500 CEO made a veiled racist joke about tech guys not belonging in the boardroom, Marcus didn't call him out publicly. He simply posted a photo of Mindspan's board meeting, a room filled with women, immigrants, and people of color, and wrote, "Looks like the future arrived early." The post went viral. But perhaps the most poetic ending came when Skyward Air, now majority-owned by Marcus's holding company, named its second flagship aircraft the Richard Winters. Not as an honor, but as a cautionary tale. A brass plaque inside the cabin read, "Named to remind us what happens when ambition exceeds ethics." Let this flight carry truth further than sabotage ever could. Passengers photographed it. Some laughed. Others reflected. The message was clear. We remember and we rebuild. In the months that followed, Marcus turned down several offers to write a memoir. He didn't want his story commodified as entertainment. Instead, he partnered with investigative journalists and advocacy organizations to launch a public database documenting incidents of corporate discrimination nationwide. Legacy, he believed, wasn't about what people remembered. It was about what they did next. At the first annual Equity and Innovation Summit, Marcus closed with a message that echoed the one from his viral op-ed now etched into the stone arch above the conference hall's entrance. They told us hard work would get us to the front of the plane. They didn't tell us we'd have to fight to stay there. He paused, scanning the faces of hundreds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and changemakers who had turned that pain into policy. But now you know. And now we fly higher together. The audience stood in ovation, not because Marcus had won, but because they all had. Because a system built to exclude had finally been cracked open. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with the unshakable resolve of one man who refused to be silent in the face of injustice. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.